So, did you know that spirituality has a recognition in acupuncture? Now, most people know that acupuncture has to do with the physical part, right? Maybe you've heard of acupuncture being good for things like, I don't know, back pain or what have you, headaches or trigeminal neuralgia. People associate acupuncture with a very, let's say, physical, Western medical kind of stuff, right? A kind of an alternative to Western medical kind of stuff, but still medical kind of stuff, right? They rarely associate acupuncture with something that is spiritual or emotional, right? Well, guess what? Acupuncture is really, really good at it. And why is it good? Because just like in any other realm, acupuncture's main strong point is that it is incredibly complex, right? Usually acupuncture books are around 800 to 1,000 pages long, right? So just like regular medical books in Western medicine, that's just as huge, the books in acupuncture theory. So there's a lot of information going. There's a lot of information. Well, guess what? Maybe you're familiar with Maslow's pyramid of psychological needs, right? What he said, this was a psychologist, is that the psychological needs of a human being are actually hierarchical. And it's actually not just the psychological ones, but the physical ones as well. So basically you start off with the basis of the pyramid from survival, and then you move on up to, I don't know, belonging, and then you keep moving up to the top one is like spirituality or you know, self-development and stuff like that. So basically we won't be thinking about self-development if we haven't got anything to eat or if we feel that our survival is threatened, right? So that's a hierarchy that this guy named Maslow discovered. But acupuncture goes a lot more than that. Now, why did I tell you about this pyramid of psychological needs? Because this is something that, of course, is true for all human beings, and it's derived from the architecture of the psyche of the human being, right? So the psyche is wired to function in a certain way. So if you satisfy one need of a human being, then automatically you move up the ladder to the next need in this pyramid of needs, and so on and so forth. So we could actually plot a kind of a course of a human being as to what he or she might want after having satisfied their particular need on that plane. So it's quite predictable. This is something that, you know, was discovered quite a long time ago. Well, guess what? Acupuncture takes that many steps forward, and it goes quite a lot deeper than that. And why do I say it goes quite a lot deeper than that? Acupuncture not only has a model of understanding spirituality, which I'm going to share with you in this video, and this is basically the subject of the video, but it actually goes much further because it allows us to act on this theoretical model, basically to plan interventions on it. Basically, it not only shows us a map of the territory, it actually helps us navigate that map. It gives us tools so that we can actually take concrete steps in achieving our goal. So, what am I talking about? Maybe some of you know that there are 12 main acupuncture channels on the human body. So these correspond to the 12 main organs in the human body as per Chinese medical view. So these are, and I'm going to take them as they go around what is called the Chinese clock, because each organ has a 2-hour interval in which its energy peaks, right? And we have heart, you know, small intestine, bladder, kidney, and then we move on to the pericardium, and then the triple heater, and then the gallbladder and liver, and then the lungs, colon, stomach, and spleen. So these are the 12, okay? Now, this is very interesting. This is where it gets really interesting, because these 12 actually, they're not just, floating around, disconnected from one another, sociophobic, not wanting to have anything one with another. Actually, they're grouped. And one way of grouping them is in pairs of yin and yang, right? So maybe, I'm sure you've heard of yin and yang, right? So yin and yang are like the two opposites. It's like yin is cold, yang is hot, yin is low, yang is high, and so on and so forth. Basically, this is part of the core of Chinese metaphysical thinking when they, put down the basis of their philosophy. And basically everything can be divided into two poles of a spectrum, right? And at one pole you have yin and the other one is yang. So anything can be grouped into yin and yang, hot and cold, black and white and stuff like that. Similarly, all of these 12 meridians are actually grouped into 6 pairs of meridians, and each of these pairs is a yin-yang pair, right? So you have, in each of these couples, you have an organ which is yin and an organ which is yang. So for example, if we take, let's say, the spleen and the spleen and the stomach both pertain to the earth element, right? So the spleen is the yin organ, the stomach is the yang organ. If we take then the metal element, right, you have the lungs, which is the yin element of the lungs, and then you have the colon or large intestine, which is the yang element of the lungs, and so on and so forth, right? But then a further degree of organization is recognized. Now, I don't want to get too technical into this, but there's a reason why I'm telling you all this, and I'll get to that reason pretty shortly, right? Just bear with me for a second. I'm just explaining to you how natural it comes that acupuncture understands spirituality in such a way so that it actually plots out a very, very clear path of evolution for each person, for each human being to, trot along in their evolution, right? Now, of course, each one has their own lessons, their own, challenges, and so on and so forth. Each one has their own potential, but the main issues, the main challenges, the main, let's say, spiritual gates, if you will, are the same for everyone, and pretty much the order in which they need to be checked is pretty much the same for everyone. Just like the pyramid of needs, of psychological needs of Maslow that I was talking about earlier. So, what's the next level of connection? Well, you see, we talked about the fact that the spleen and the stomach are yin and yang, coupled, and together they make up the earth element, and then we have the metal element, which is coupled between the lungs and the colon. So the next level of connection is that, interesting little fact, guess what? The colon meridian and the stomach meridian are linked as well. But this time, not because they're linked yin and yang, they're both actually yang, right? But the colon and the stomach are linked because one meridian is connected and continued with the other. What am I talking about? Well, the colon starts here on this finger, and then goes up the arm, and then up the neck, and then on the face, and it ends here, right? But then right from here, the stomach meridian starts, and it goes around the face, and then it goes down the chest and all the way down to the foot. So they're connected like train coaches that are linked to one another. The colon is continued as its pathway is continued with the stomach meridian. So they are connected. And guess what? The lungs and the spleen are also connected, right? So this is very interesting because we see that in these four, we have the lungs and colon, which are connected yin-yang, and then we have the spleen and stomach, which are connected yin-yang, and then we have the spleen and the lungs, which are connected through meridian pathways, and then we have the colon and the stomach, which are connected through meridian pathways. So we have a group of 4 organs that are linked in various ways. And guess what? If you generalize this, if you look at all the other 8, those 8 will be divided into similar 2 groups of 4 meridians each. So the 12 main channels of acupuncture can be divided into 3 main groups of meridians that are like that, right? So they are 3 groups of channels which are very much connected physically through their pathways and, as we'll explore shortly, through their spiritual functions. And this is where it really gets interesting, right? Because I wanted to give you the theoretical background, the structure, a little bit of the structure, so that you understand how come these things are linked. And now we'll go into the psychology and psychotherapy part of it, right? So, these 3 groups of meridians are actually corresponding to the 3 realms of human evolution. And this is huge. This is absolutely huge, because it's like, imagine that the game of life, imagine you're playing a computer game, right? The game of life has 3 main levels, right? If you play a computer game, it may have, I don't know, 10, 50, 100, I don't know. The game of life has 3 main levels. Level 1, group 1, we'll discuss it in a moment. Level 2, the second group of 4 meridians. Level 3, the third group of 4 meridians, right? So what happens there? The group number 1 has to do with the ones that I just described, right? The stomach, spleen, the lungs, and the colon. Why these? Well, this corresponds to childhood. This corresponds to our earliest development. But the reality is, and I've seen this time and time again in my practice, most people never make it out of level 1. And what do I mean by that? In level 1, the lessons of this plane, and I call it a plane because it's like, imagine, again, I'm doing the metaphor with computer games. In computer games, you have like open world maps, and it's a huge map, and on that map, maybe you can explore. You have some challenges here, you have some, I don't know, demons to battle there, you have some, other quests here and there, right? Well, it's like each of these 3 levels is an open map, because on this map, in each of these 3 levels, in each of these 3 realms, we have 4 meridians, and each of these 4 meridians has its own spiritual journey. Yeah, right, that's right. This is one of the things that I think are magical about acupuncture. These 4 meridians, and in each of these groups, each of them has its own spiritual journey. Imagine that you have an acupuncture channel, and you can imagine it like a line with points on it, and then you can imagine going from point to point to point to point, and they're like subway stations on a subway line, and each point on these acupuncture channels is corresponding to a certain stage in the lessons learned on that channel. On these channels, what we learn is developing certain virtues and conquering certain difficulties. Now, of course, I could go on, I could make this video a weekend-long video. I could make it very, very long, because it's extremely complex. And when I do my courses, I teach students, we actually do that, right? Because in order to practice that, you need to understand that at that deep level. And don't imagine that this is simple. You need to come back over and over and over again over these and study them and actually feel them on yourself if you want to understand acupuncture. Because acupuncture is not just a hypothetical, theoretical stuff that you learn and you go through it once and then you know it. You actually have to know it not just from here. You have to know it through your experience, through you having gone through that path. So, coming back to the meridians, when we talk about the meridians in the first group, let's analyze what this group is made of, right? So this first realm is about independence, is about power, is about the ability to set down and put down very clear boundaries. When was the last time that you said yes to something that you really wished you'd have said no to, right? When was the last time that you kind of avoided conflict, even though you would have wanted to actually, raise your voice and actually say, hey, that's not really okay with me, but you said, fuck it, let's not get into conflict with that person because, let's keep it peaceful and friendly, right? Each time you avoid being authentic, it hurts you. Each time you avoid voicing out your desires, your needs, each time you do that, you betray your soul. And that is the most powerful generator of frustration and feeling of self-betrayal that is possible, in my opinion, right? So this phase, in this realm, in this group 1, as I call it, these meridians come together to teach us power, independence, the ability to say no to the things we want to say no, so that when we do say yes, it is a wholehearted yes. It's not just a complacency yes. Okay. No, it's not like that, right? So this is very important. But let's dive a little bit deeper to understand how these meridians come together, and I hope here you will understand how this comes to create a spiritual journey. So let's start with the stomach, right? The stomach and the spleen are to do with the earth element, and the earth element has to do with stability. So basically, when we treat the spleen and the stomach, we create stability, we create self-assuredness. Anxiety is the #1 inhibitor of speaking out. If you have anxiety, the #1 emotional spectrum that will be inhibited is conflict. Therefore, anything that is related to frustration, not being okay with stuff, resentment, conflict, anger, you name it, right? Rage, whatever. All these will be downplayed, inhibited, pushed down under a rug. So when people come to me for, let's say, anxiety issues, and it's the earth kind of anxiety, which is the most common one, when we treat the earth element through the stomach and the spleen, the first thing that they're gonna feel when the treatment kicks in is anger and frustration and a lot of internal tension. This is not created by the treatment, this is just brought up from the subconscious by the treatment, because that frustration was there to begin with, but it was there because it was pushed down, because it was never voiced, because you can't afford to voice these things if you feel anxious or insecure. So that's how they come to be. So basically, the stomach is the organ which is responsible for swallowing. But when we talk about swallowing, it's not just the physical ingestion of physical food in which you put it in your mouth and you swallow it down. It's also metaphorical, right? What do you accept? Accept, like in your being, accept in your life. Do you stomach something or you don't stomach something? Are you able to be fine with accepting a situation, or do you just pretend to be fine? And this is the evolution of the stomach, because the stomach teaches us how to be authentic. It teaches us to say no when we want to say no, and yes when we want to say yes. And why does this have to do with the stomach? Well, the idea is that with the stomach, we actually, if you imagine swallowing food, right? If the food is what you want, if the food is good for you, what's going to happen is that you are going to be nourished by that food. That food is going to be transformed into nourishment, and this is the function of the spleen. But if that food is poisoned, then the stomach spits it out. You're gonna vomit that food, and because you're gonna vomit it, maybe that's gonna help you not die from the poison that you've just ingested, right? So preventing the processing and absorption of those food poisons by vomiting them is the stomach's way of protecting you. Well, guess what? The stomach's way of protecting you emotionally is to give you the authenticity and the strength and the courage to say, no, this does not conform with who I am and what I want. So the stomach is all about authenticity. Now, once you've ingested something, once you've accepted something in your life, what do? If the stomach has been right in accepting it, then that means it's good for you. It's authentic with you. It's in tune with what you need. So if you've accepted it, you might as well enjoy it, because, you know, let's face it, that's the purpose of taking in things, right? On a physical level, we want to transform them into something nourishing. On the emotional and spiritual level, we want to transform that experience into something emotionally nourishing for us. The inability to feel nourished has to do with the spleen. So this inability, if you do have a spleen problem, is gonna keep you up at night, and it's gonna make you feel like an inner void that you have inside, and that inner void is actually gonna make you go and, you know, explore the fridge at 2 a.m. in the morning because you feel depressed and anxious, and you're just gonna eat a 2-kilogram bucket of ice cream, and you're gonna be fat as hell because you can't help it, right? So that internal void is addressed by the spleen, because the spleen helps you feel nourished. If you do feel nourished, then you feel that enough is enough, right? Another symptom of the spleen is that you feel that the day is coming to an end, and yet you can't actually go to sleep because you don't feel that you've taken enough nourishment out of what the day should have given you. And it's like, you know, the day is over, but I don't feel that I've lived enough, so I'm just gonna stay up later because I want to, I don't know, enjoy more. But it's like in the 24 hours of the day, and in that part of the day in which I'm supposed to be awake, I don't feel I can take in enough nourishment to feel that I've had enough. By the way, enough, right? This is a magic word, the enough part. And enough has many, many meanings. I could say that group number 1 of these 4 meridians is group enough. We can actually call it group enough, because you look at the stomach, and the stomach, if it finds out that, you know, you're accepting something that you shouldn't be accepting, says, you know, enough is enough. I'm going to say no to this shit, right? When the spleen is taking on and taking in what the stomach has deemed acceptable to us, the feeling is, I have enough. Everything is exactly as it should be. And then we go on to the colon and to the lungs. And there we find another dimension of the enough part, right? So the lungs and the colon pertain to the metal element, and metal is associated with value. Now, I did mention in the beginning that group number 1 has to do with our childhood. But when I say our childhood, I mean what we should have gotten out of our childhood. It does not mean that if you're an adult, you're past this group. Actually, 99% of the adults haven't passed this group, right? Because this is the group of resources that we should have taken, we should have gotten from our parents. And this is like stability. We should have had a stable home in which the parents are happy and fulfilled and at peace with one another and happy and at peace with us. And that's the earth element. And we should have had a good relationship with the mother, and that's the earth element again. And then we should have had a good relationship with our parents when it comes to our value our self-worth. Now, what does that mean? It means that we should feel that we are good enough. Now, maybe you've had a childhood which resulted in you feeling not good enough. You might feel that, hey, you know, I've had the perfect childhood, but you know what, at the end I feel that I still don't feel that I'm good enough. I'm a perfectionist. I always have this gnawing voice in my head which tells me that, you know, have I done enough? Have I done enough? No, I haven't done enough. I'm not good enough. I need to be number one, and if I'm number one, it's still not good enough, right? So whatever you do, have that critical voice in your head. That is the bad part of the metal element. The good part of the metal element is a voice that tells you, yes, you're good enough. Yes, everything is exactly as it should be. The metal element is also the element which is related to a sense of bearings, of what gives life its meaning. Why are we, you know, why are we alive? Why are we on this earth? What is the meaning of our life? And what is the meaning of the universe, right? Now, this is not a theoretical or hypothetical or cognitive endeavor. It's not like if the lungs and the colon are functioning well, you'll have the answers to all the philosophical questions that arise from here. You're not going to be a philosopher. But what you will be is at peace. And that's what counts. Because there is a feeling that, and this is when the metal element functions well, which means that the lungs and the colon function well, things are exactly as they should be. How does it look when things are not as they should be? Well, they look in the following way. They look as if there is a lot of injustice happening, and you're going to be very sensitive to this injustice, and you're basically going to be quite cynical and quite sarcastic and quite acidic, and you know, not a happy person, because all of the injustice in the world, and maybe you're going to be even angry at God or at the universe or whoever or whatever is up there somewhere, right, in some higher dimension. That's the very definition of the imbalance of the metal element, right? So the lungs, what do? What do they physically do? They help us with inspiration and expiration, right? Inhale, exhale. But I want to point out inspiration, right? There's a reason why we use these words. And the reason is that inspiration has to do with the act of breathing, but also has to do with finding meaning. And if you, in the study of acupuncture, we study a lot of these metaphors because they're not accidental, and also actually they are beyond the boundaries of individual languages. You'll find them in many languages, and for some reason, I don't know, I haven't met anyone to connect the dots and tell you, you know, this is the metaphor which is in that language and is in that language and it's in that language, and they are linked to these organs, right? So inspiration, meaning, and breathing, that's what the lungs do. The colon, on the other hand, is about letting go. So if you look at the lungs and the colon together, one is about receiving something fresh, inspiration, and the other one is about letting something go. Receiving the new, letting go of the old. That's what this is about. So this is very interesting because, you know, you can think about, you know, people finding it difficult to let go of stuff, right? Whether it be physical stuff, as in, you know, I don't need this, but I'm going to keep it. Who knows? Maybe I need it, and then they're just going to hoard stuff and have their house full of unnecessary stuff. That's a very typical colon stuff. Yeah, you don't let go. It's like you're constipated, but not just with poo, with things in your life. Your things in your life, now physical things are one thing, but when you're constipated with emotions, especially the toxic emotions, that's gonna really mess up your life, because if you're gonna be having a problem with the colon, you won't be able to, or you'll have a lot of difficulty letting go of grudges, of anger, of painful periods in your past, and you won't be able to truly move on. And if you can't move on, you know, if you're stuck in the past, you can't be here in the present, nor can you really think or contemplate the future. So basically you're really stuck, right? So, but when you do have the pleasure of really letting go, suddenly things take meaning. Suddenly you have a whole new level of detachment, right? And you can say, you know, I've had that for enough time. It's time to let it go. And then you get inspiration. And then you find the bearings in your life, you find meaning in your life, and you find that you yourself as a human being, you are enough. So these four, the spleen, the stomach, the lungs, and the colon, they come together, and together, what do? They empower you. Why? Well, because you're gonna have a lot of self-worth, you're going to have a lot of stability, and you're going to feel powerful. And when you have all these incredibly useful resources, emotional resources, guess what? There's going to be a purge in your emotions, because you're going to be able to bring up all that resentment that you've been keeping on the inside, all those frustrations which you've repressed, and you're going to be able to speak up. And that is incredibly empowering. That is such a show for me as a therapist to see in my patients as I guide them, because this is empowering them to truly start making the changes and living the changes that they always wanted, but never actually had the power, the sustenance, the emotional sustenance, the support that they need. But not from me. I mean, yes, of course, I, like any therapist, give them support, but that's nothing compared to the true support which you find in yourself. And that is priceless. So what can you expect at the end of this journey in group one? Remember, this is just group one. This is just a little part of the journey, but this is like, you know, the takeoff of a rocket. I remember that I had this notion, I read about it somewhere, that when a rocket takes off towards the moon, for example, right, most of its fuel is used up in the first few minutes just to detach from the Earth's surface, because that's the most difficult part. And then in the last part, it covers the most distance with the least amount of fuel. Guess what? The spiritual evolution of the human being is very similar to that. Most of the resources are dedicated to going through the journey of the first group of meridians, because once you do that, you have a lot of power to go through the others. And you have when you actually go through all these meridians in the first group, you finally find incredible support to bring up repressed emotional material that might have manifested in your life through a physical disease, like somatizations, right? And this is commonplace. So I hope you're really interested in what I'm saying. So I was just realizing as I was saying this, you know, this whole thing, that like always, it's fascinating to me to actually film this. And of course, I've made it quite long. So in order to make it digestible for you, I'm going to split the whole 3 areas into 3 different videos. So this podcast episode is actually going to be the first of 3 parts, and in each of the following parts we're actually going to explore the other 2, right? Because as you see, they're quite complex, and I want to give them enough resources. So yeah, stay tuned. And in the next one, we're going to talk about the second group, which is all about what you do with power. Because once you have power, the biggest question that arises is, what do I do with it, you know? And that is no little question. That is one of the biggest questions that there is in spirituality, because it pertains to what is my mission? What is my identity? How can I gain clarity and be in the here and now so that I can look inside with clarity and see who I truly am? And when I say who I truly am, I don't mean just, you know, I'm a human being, I'm breathing and so on. I mean, what is my spiritual potential? What is my life mission? What is my contribution that I need to bring into this world? So we'll talk about this in the next episode of the podcast. See you there. And blah, 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 you know, the drill with subscribe and like and all that. I'll see you in the next video.